Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on the description. An eerie silence surrounded the hidden room Bakurio's main body was training at. He was in a hidden location that was under the protection of countless seals that were a combination of the Otsutsuki's knowledge as well as his own. In fact, the isolation of this location was so strong to the point that even that dark being wasn't able to locate Bakurio's main body and decided to go after his clone that was training dark chakra instead. Ellipsis. It seems my worries weren't unfounded. That Jashin can manipulate dark chakra and negative energy to a far higher degree than what I can imagine currently. It's probably fair to assume that wherever there's negativity, that guy has eyes, but who could have expected that he's sealed, who can do such a thing to someone as strong as him? Muttered Bakurio to himself with his eyes clouded in doubt. I need to be careful. He's probably going to stall the current situation of the world as much as possible to hasten his unsealing process. I need to grow stronger, far stronger than I currently am if I want to defeat him. With this thought in mind, Bakurio simply closed his eyes and re-entered the endless cycle of destruction and rebirth that kept making his supreme body grow stronger. Ellipsis. 1 month later. Bakurio noticed that his sand army wasn't as effective as it used to be as the hidden village of the dead got used to it and created many countermeasures to deal with it. In fact, even the beasts and demons appeared to have gotten instructions on how to deal with it. In the end, their weakness is the limitation of their base stats. I need to evolve this skill if I want it to be useful, but unfortunately, it requires my new seal mastery to reach level 10. How am I supposed to do that? Bakurio was truly confused. After turning Shukaku into a living seal, Bakurio not only managed to gain him as an ally with a little bit of manipulation, but he also managed to complete his sealing art advancement quest, and he gained a new mastery called Primordial Seals. Primordial Seals Level 1. Primordial seals are a representation of the laws governing the world. They were born from nothing and can turn into anything. They are natural, conscious, and alive, plus 10% effectiveness to all seals. I barely understand how to make living seals, and now I have to comprehend things equivalent to laws. These masteries are becoming more and more complicated and ridiculous, thought Bakurio while letting out a sigh as he stared at the dark walls of his cocoon. However, as he was lost in his thoughts, something suddenly attracted his attention. In the academy located in the middle of the Land of Fire, one of Bakurio's true clones was calmly teaching a class of students, among which was none other than Rinmara. However, a ninja dressed as an Anbu suddenly rushed to his side and whispered something into his ears, and it made his eyes flicker slightly with a deep cold light, but he didn't let it show too much on his face and casually closed the book he was teaching with before he said, "Today's lesson ends here, disperse and don't forget your homework." Then, he started leaving hurriedly with the Anbu. Ranmaru's eyes flickered with a red light as he sat among his fellow students that were surprised by the sudden interruption of their lesson and didn't say anything. Oi Ranmara, what are you being in a daze for? A blonde girl suddenly approached Ranmara and asked him curiously. She was Ino. Meanwhile, Ranmara simply smiled awkwardly before he said, "Ah, sorry. I just remembered that I have to go to the toilet," before he stood up and took off, leaving Ino wondering with her head tilted. How do you forget such a thing? However, Shikamaru, who was listening to this from the side with a lazy look on his face, simply frowned, but he didn't want to get involved as he simply thought, it seems like something serious happened for them to bring the monster out. I better not get myself involved. And right he was as Bakurio turned to the Anbu woman that came to him and asked coldly, "What happened?" "Yes sir, we were finally able to locate Mukai Kohinata," spoke the Anbu captain hesitantly, and she instantly felt a chill emanating from Bakurio as he simply kept moving and asked coldly, "What did you discover?" "After following his tracks for the past 2 years, we concluded that he disappeared somewhere in the Land of Silence 1 year ago," reported that Anbu woman, and she couldn't help but gulp slightly as she stared at the dark killing intent accumulating in Bakurio's eyes before he nodded at her and disappeared into the distance, but a little boy decided to follow after him. Ellipsis. Mukai's one of Bakurio's most trusted friends, similar to Minato. However, they couldn't be any more different personality-wise, so while Minato was occupied with the overall situation of the world and focusing on mastering his sage arts, Mukai decided to train in his own way and started hunting beasts, S-ranked or higher beasts. And he terrorized the poor beasts to say the least, as his hunting record was unmatched, surpassing all of the Akatsuki members that were doing the same task. However, one day approximately a year ago, he suddenly disappeared from the face of the world and Bakurio wasn't able to find any clues regarding his location, but he was finally getting hints that he was already suspecting. It seems like I should have investigated that weird organization sooner. I really hoped I could get them as an ally since they had some decent members, but if they want to die, so be it, thought Bakurio as he recalled the weird group that started hunting beasts in the vicinity of the Land of Silence before Mukai got there, including an SS-ranked beast. But for them to defeat a monster like Mukai, this is close to impossible, especially considering that bastard's personality. He would rather die than allow himself to get captured, and the least he would do is remove that group from the map with his mastered 8 gates which will alert Bakurio of his location. Something's is fishy, I can smell it all the way from here. What's that bastard playing at? Wondered Bakurio as he hasted his movement, but he was suddenly interrupted by a gentle voice calling him, "Teacher, let me help you." This kid, it seems like he wants to repay the favor for allowing Raiga to survive, huh? Well, he's working his ass off as a beast hunter, so it doesn't matter, but still, it will be quite problematic to bring him along. I can't protect you where I'm going, but you can be of use to a certain group of idiots. Are you willing to take this risk? Spoke Bakurio calmly, and Rinmara instantly replied with a determined look in his eyes, making Bakurio sigh slightly before he stared at his shadow that was extending far behind him and asked, "What about you, Shikamaru?" Rinmara was slightly surprised as he didn't think he was being followed, so he didn't find it necessary to use his dojutsu, a careless mistake he wouldn't have done if he was an experienced ninja. And he ended up watching in shock as Shikamaru came out of his own shadow, a technique he learned from Bakurio, and replied awkwardly, "Do I really have a choice?" Hearing this, Bakurio smirked slightly before he said while patting him on the shoulder, "Nope, take care of Rinmara for me." Then, he casually summoned a giant falcon and made it pick Rinmara and the reluctant Shikamaru before it took them to the south of the Land of Fire, where two crazy brothers and their third teammate were fighting an S-ranked beast of the highest level. Ellipsis. Seeing them taking off, Bakurio turned his attention to his mission and instantly flickered away at a frightening speed in the direction of the Land of Silence while another true clone simply took the place of this one as a teacher. He was really angry, so he was sending one of his strongest true clones. The Land of Silence, like any other land, was ruled by a daimyo. It was a land of samurai similar to the Land of Iron, so they were a bit isolated from the other lands that mainly relied on ninjas, so it always had problems with its economy, resulting in a lot of poverty in the land. As a result, many currents started circulating under the surface and a rebellion was slowly brewing. However, did Bakurio care at all about any of this as he set foot on this land filled with mountains? Not at all. In fact, he was moving at a rapid pace and didn't care at all about the suffering he passed by. After all, this scene was the norm in most villages in the world nowadays after the world economy took a huge hit. The emergence of beasts and the dead made it hard to exchange resources between two villages in the same land, not to mention exchanging them between two lands. So, all he could do was slaughter any beasts that occasionally attack him and leave them for any lucky villagers to pick them. What a pity, this place probably wouldn't have lasted even if the world didn't fall into all of this chaos, thought Bakurio silently as he made his way into the mountains away from the civilization of this land. This was the same path Mukai led, and it was here that any last traces of his were completely eradicated. After landing in a small clearing, Bakurio closed his eyes and tried to sense his surroundings to the best of his ability. No traces remain at all. Were the Anbu mistaken or what? Wondered Bakurio coldly as something didn't feel right, but suddenly he opened his eyes and stared at someone that appeared right in front of him while almost evading his detection, which was an unhuman feat in itself. "You actually detected me before I revealed myself. It seems like a big fish took the bait," spoke the unknown man calmly while staring at Bakurio's eyes in intrigue. Bakurio observed the man silently and instantly made the most logical judgment: monster run. But logic wasn't always the way to go, especially when you are a monster as well. So, he calmly spoke, "Who are you?" "Me. You can call me Jigen. Don't worry, we will have plenty of time to talk. I'm quite interested in you, Bakurio Uchiha." Jigen was a fairly tall man of light complexion. He sported a shaved head, apart from a long mohawk of black hair tied in a long ponytail style reaching his lower back, pronounced eye ridges void of brows, a broad nose, and large black eyes. He sported a diamond-shaped mark on his chin and a Roman numeral, tattooed below his left eye. He also wore black nail polish on his fingernails and toenails, 5 red earrings on the top of each ear, and an additional one at the bottom of each ear. Interesting, it seems like you knew what you were doing when you captured Mukai. You were probably the one behind clearing this area out of beasts as well. Let's see if you can capture me. Right as Bakurio's words ended, he disappeared and rushed at Jigen at full speed. Foolish human, spoke Jigen calmly without moving at all and easily blocked Bakurio's punch that was heading to his head. Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he felt as if he was punching a giant mountain instead of a normal human, but he didn't hesitate to spin and kick Jigen on the stomach while focusing all of his chakra into its Tsunade style, and the impact created a terrifying shockwave. As expected, that even cracked the ground under them and shook the hearts of the beasts that were eyeing them secretly in the distance. However, despite all of this, to Bakurio's shock, his kick didn't seem to have any effect on Jigen, who casually dusted the white robe he was wearing and said, "It seems like you won't go down without a fight just like the other one, it's fine by me." Then, Bakurio watched in shock as Jigen moved with such an unhuman speed and sent a punch directly at his stomach. "My reaction speed is there, but my body can't keep up. Who's this monster?" wondered Bakurio in shock. His current clone was in no way weak. In fact, Bakurio only had 2 clones like it since he spent so much of his soul and body creating it to the point that it took him 6 months to recuperate, but thanks to that, it retained all of his talents. Meaning that this clone is as strong as his main body before it got the talent upgrade. However, it didn't seem like it would be enough to face the monster in front of him. But Bakurio's wasn't weak either, and before that punch could connect with his stomach, he calmly thought, "Instant bind." Then, countless seals started to emerge from Jigen's hands and stomach and stretched to cover all of his body. This was the skill Bakurio gained after his seal arts reached level 100. "This is, you put these seals when you punched and kicked me. How sneaky." Jigen's eyes widened slightly as he found himself restrained. And Bakurio immediately smirked and said, "Let me show you another interesting seal." Before he punched Jigen in the head quickly, since he knew the seal won't hold him in place for long, and this time, Jigen felt a chill as Bakurio's hand was completely black and covered in an aura of death. Dark touch plus death touch. Jigen's pupils constricted until they became 2 small dots before he unleashed his superhuman strength to break the instant bind seals and tilted his head to dodge Bakurio's destructive punch. However, as fast as he was, he still got grazed by it, causing curse marks to start emerging on his cheeks, but he somehow destroyed them easily. "It seems like I underestimated you. You have seen through my condition, didn't you?" spoke Jigen calmly as he made some distance away from Bakurio, who was unleashing death energy in all directions. "Not completely. I still need to know who you truly are, although knowing that your body is barely holding up from your immense power isn't that hard to figure out with my eyes." "I see, you are special indeed. Now I'm sure those dead hunters are related to you. I can't wait to research you later for all you know." Then Jigen attacked Bakurio again, and this time he was serious. Meanwhile, Bakurio simply took out 2 kunai and threw one at him, but it simply deflected off of Jigen's body as if it was some sort of armor while he unleashed his energy to dispel Bakurio's death energy and prepared to immobilize him. In the last frame of this action, Bakurio's hand let go of his other kunai before he disappeared from Jigen's view. "This is space jutsu," wondered Jigen before he quickly turned around to the kunai Bakurio first attacked him with and noticed that this time, his hand was covered in dark flames and was heading for his head, so he quickly turned around with his extreme speed preparing to kick Bakurio away. However, again, right before his kick could connect, Bakurio suddenly appeared behind him thanks to the kunai he let go of earlier, and directly punched him on the back, setting his robe on fire and sending him flying through many trees into the distance. "Disc, I really didn't want to reveal this jutsu, but now you've forced me. Let me show you the terror of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu," spoke Bakurio with a cold look on his face, while staring at Jigen, who was trying to put off his blaze release. "This is truly unexpected," muttered Jigen after having absorbed Bakurio's blaze release off his robe into the weird seals covering his body, and it made Bakurio frown slightly as this was similar to Rinnegan's ability. This man's body is abnormally strong, but he's clearly afraid of using his full power as this body can't handle it. How strong will he be if he was at full strength? This thought truly worried Bakurio, but he didn't have time to waste as Jigen was already in front of him with his fist almost taking off his head. He's moving faster. Bakurio instantly appeared at the location of one of his kunai, but this time, Jigen was already there waiting for him and he landed a direct hit on his stomach and sent him flying through so many trees. "It quite easy if I know where you can appear," spoke Jigen calmly as he made his way through the destruction Bakurio left behind after his crash. However, Bakurio's body was missing when he reached the end of that destruction, and he instead found countless seal tags that started shining. Jigen's eyes narrowed, but he didn't have any time to react as those tags all exploded at the same time creating a huge explosion that surpassed any tailed beast bombs. Ellipsis. I wonder if those 10 medium cage level explosion talismans from the system had any effect, muttered Bakurio while standing on a tree not that far from the explosion. However, as the explosion calmed down, he could clearly sense a wave of weak life force jumping into the air out of the smoke of the explosion before the man in question locked into his position and rushed at him by jumping through the air. No damage thought Bakurio before he quickly dodged the human meteor falling on him and took out a good quality sword that was actually a rare grade item, although it was still far from his legendary sword. Then, he calmly entered a stance and stared coldly at Jigen. "Do you really think you can fight me head-on?" spoke Jigen arrogantly, and Bakurio simply waved his sword into the air at him at a terrifying speed as his sword was surrounded by a unique aura. This was his level 100 swift sword style, and it increased his attack speed with the sword by 500%. And that wasn't all, as it was also coupled with his void slash, which caused the simple slash to turn into a deadly attack, and it appeared out of nowhere right at the back of Jigen's neck, making him feel a terrible sense of danger that made him duck down. However, Bakurio instantly followed up by activating his sword intent and true fighting masteries coupled with his future sight, and Jigen suddenly felt like he was facing a monster as Bakurio blinked right on top of him and slashed him countless times. However, Jigen surprisingly was still able to keep up, although Bakurio noticed that his life force was burning even faster until he eventually sacrificed a significant chunk of his life force to land a kick on Bakurio's abdomen that was covered with his exoskeleton. The first time Jigen landed a punch on him, Bakurio used his body control to shift his organs and allowed it to land on him, and it caused him devastating damage, but he quickly recovered from it with his restoration skill and a health potion. However, this time, he clearly sensed the weird energy covering Jigen's foot, and if it landed on him, he would certainly die. So, he could only blink away from it at the last second before he took out a special kunai that had the Flying Thunder God Jutsu seal carved on it and threw it into the air while muttering, "Dark Rain." And right as he did, that kunai transformed into countless kunai with a dark aura surrounding them, and they started landing all over the place around them. Meanwhile, as he suspected, Jigen's kick created a terrifying shockwave that erased the forest behind him from existence. "You dodged this time as well, and you didn't use seals to help you this time. This is quite troublesome if I let you keep using your space abilities," muttered Jigen while casually waving his hand and deflecting any kunai that were falling on him. "Weren't you confident just now about beating me and getting any answers you want out of me? Go ahead, show me how you plan to do that," spoke Bakurio coldly before he started attacking Jigen relentlessly while avoiding his attacks with the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. This was only possible thanks to his incredible reaction speed. In fact, he was sure that if it was Minato or Tobirama, they wouldn't be able to react to this man's attacks. After all, the weakness of this jutsu and its strength relies on the user's reaction speed, and Bakurio had plenty of it. This fight went on for a while, spanning all across the land of silence and resulting in endless destruction. However, Jigen soon got angry and decided to end it as he got serious and used his unique ability Daikokuden. Bakurio was barely able to fly to one of his kunai, avoiding a dark projectile that suddenly appeared in his previous location and disappeared into the distance. What was that? I was barely able to see it, thought Bakurio, but Jigen didn't give him the time to contemplate further as another projectile flew to his heart, and countless more flew to every possible location he could appear at. Bakurio dodged more than 10 times at the same time, but eventually, a projectile went through his right arm and lodged itself there. Then, just 4 seconds later, his body was turned into a porcupine despite its strong defense. He lost. "You should be proud. No one was able to push me this far before," spoke Jigen while standing in front of Bakurio, who still didn't fall even after all of these wounds, and simply stared at him coldly and said, "Who are you? We will have plenty of time to speak while I experiment on you along with that other man," replied Jigen, and Bakurio watched as a portal appeared in front of them and Jigen made him pass through it. This space jutsu, it's similar to Kagaya's. Don't tell me, could it be, this guy is the one that came with her to Earth back then? Ishiki was it. Bakurio had an undiscernible smile on his face as he allowed Jigen to take him away. This was his plan from the start after all. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, to the south of the Land of Fire, a terrifying fight was currently taking place between a group of youngsters and a giant gorilla. This gorilla was as big as the four-tailed Songoku, and it might even be as strong as him, as it was emanating a terrifying aura. This was an S+ beast, equivalent to a high cage. And to make matters worse, it wasn't even alone, as it had many underlings while fighting the group of 10 youngsters. Meanwhile, on top of a falcon high in the sky, Shikamaru and Rinmara observed the situation with clear fear in their eyes, and Rinmara was the first to speak as his red eyes kept glowing. 3 of them are injured, but it's nothing serious. However, they will lose if this goes on, as the monkeys keep targeting the weaker members to distract the others. Hearing this, Shikamaru face-palmed while staring at the sky before he lamented, "How did I get myself involved in this mess?" And Rinmara simply stared at him awkwardly with nothing to say, as he felt guilty, until Shikamaru wiped away the lazy look on his face and said, "Okay, I have a plan." Rinmara was excited and quickly said, "What is it?" "Let's run away," said Shikamaru seriously, causing Ranmaru's little brain to freeze. And seeing this, Shikamaru simply shook his head and said, "I was just kidding. Let's head down." Was he really kidding? Or was it a test? Wondered Rinmara while staring at the back of the youngster in front of him silently. Inside a simply decorated room that was located in Bakurio's base where his main body hid, a woman with long white hair and a weird slit on her forehead was currently meditating with her eyes closed. However, as the sound of footsteps approached her room, she calmly opened her eyes and stared at the man that was standing in front of her curiously. "Bakurio, need something?" asked Kagaya, with her curiosity turning into a slight frown on her face after noticing the cold look on Bakurio's face. "Ah." Bakurio nodded calmly before he sat facing her and said directly, "I found your old friend." Kagaya seemed slightly surprised, but there wasn't much expression on her face as she responded, "Old friend? I have no such thing." Bakurio couldn't help but smirk when he heard this, as his Sharingan started to revolve silently before he said, "Let me show you, he might disagree with your statement." Then, his eye ignited with a blood-red light, and Kagaya didn't resist it and allowed herself to be dragged into his memories, the memories of his fight with the man called Jigen. After a few moments of silence, Kagaya's snow-white eyes suddenly started gushing with pure coldness as she muttered through gritted teeth, "There's no mistaking it, only that man can use Daikokuden, Ishiki's dojutsu. This is definitely Ishiki using a mortal's body as his vessel, but it appears that he barely found a suitable vessel, and this one is barely containing his immense power, which is why he's showing this meager level of power." Bakurio couldn't help but shrug when he heard this and eventually said, "You call the peak of Super Cage level meager? We need to kill him before he turns into trouble," spoke Kagaya seriously while standing up, as she knew full well the danger of a man like Ishiki, but Bakurio instantly caught her hand and said calmly, with his previous smirk gone from his face, "Calm down, I have plans for him. No, he's too dangerous to be left alone like this," spoke Kagaya again, but she suddenly paused when she noticed the eeriness in Bakurio's eyes as he said, "Trust me, there's no escape for him." Kagaya contemplated silently for a while before she decided to show Bakurio her battle with Ishiki to make him understand just how strong he is, but his expression didn't change at all to her surprise, and she eventually gave up and nodded. "Fine, but tell me what you plan to do." Bakurio's previous coldness dissipated as he replied with a smile, "Sure." Ellipsis. Meanwhile, at the south of the Land of Fire, Bakurio's and Kakashi's teams were currently doing their best to fight the S+ rank gorilla. Sogetsu was working on restraining it while Kazuki kept using flashy attacks to distract it. Sasuke and Naruto were responsible for finishing it off, while Sakura and Hinata remained on standby to assist them if they ever need it. With them was Kurenai and her team, which consisted of Kiba, Shino, and Shiki Uchiha, and they were tasked with keeping an eye on the surroundings. However, their plan failed spectacularly when a wave of monkeys that had many A ranks and B ranks come rushing at them from all sides and almost annihilated Team Kurenai if not for Naruto, Sasuke, Hinata, and Sakura helping them out to fend them off. This shift made the pressure of fighting the S+ ranks beast fall on the shoulders of the two brothers, and they were struggling to deal with this beast. Yet despite all of this, they still received many injuries among their ranks including Sakura and Kurenai that tried to save Hinata from a sneak attack, and this outcome is already good considering they would have died if not for Bakurio's training that taught them how to deal with crowds even if they were at a disadvantage. Currently, Sasuke and Naruto were standing back to back, each holding a short sword in hand and panting slightly from having to deal with the countless waves of monkeys and defending their friends, and Naruto couldn't help but ask, "Oi Sasuke, can you see any way out of this situation?" Sasuke's eyes scanned the battlefield quickly and he promptly launched an explosive kunai at a monkey that was trying to sneak attack the injured Kurenai before he said, "At this rate, we will definitely die here." Naruto suddenly clenched his hands and he couldn't help but grit his teeth, especially when he saw the injured Kazuki and Sogetsu fighting that dangerous beast alone, and he couldn't help but think, if only we can take down that huge monkey, the situation will become more manageable. Sasuke was feeling the same, but they knew they couldn't get distracted at all, or one of their friends might die. In this despair-filled situation, a monkey managed to sneak past their defense and lunged at Kurenai. "No! Protect Sensei!" yelled Kiba, as he rushed at the monkey, causing their formation to break, which made that monkey smirk and retreat as another one suddenly attacked from the new hole created. "That was a trap. It seems like this is the end for me," muttered Kurenai as she watched the giant monkey carrying a huge stone club and swinging it at her. The battlefield almost grew still and even Sogetsu's usually calm eyes rippled like waves from the helplessness he was feeling, but a voice suddenly broke the silence, causing the giant club and the gorilla to freeze midair as he said, "Sorry, but I can't let you harm my teacher's future wife." This voice. Kurenai's eyes widened slightly and she couldn't help but stare at her side and noticed a young man emerging from her shadow with an annoyed look on his face, and surprisingly, his shadow was connected to the gorilla's shadow. "Shikamaru!" Naruto yelled in excitement and Shikamaru responded with a sigh, "I can hear you just fine if you don't yell." But this wasn't all, as a young man suddenly landed from the sky on the top of the stunned gorilla with his eyes shining with a blood-red light, and he started absorbing its life force until its black fur turned completely white, and Shikamaru retrieved his shadow and let it crumble under the weight of the club it was carrying. Meanwhile, the blue-haired kid had his face turned completely flushed, making him appear even cuter before he rushed to Kurenai's side and started feeding her that life force to assist Sakura, who was trying to heal her. "This is, how warm. You are that new kid that joined the academy. What a wonderful dojutsu you have," muttered Kurenai as she felt the life force coursing through her body and making her feel alive. Renmara simply smiled shyly, not knowing what to say before he responded, "I unlocked this ability thanks to teacher healing me, although I can't keep that life force stored for long. It's still amazing enough," spoke Kurenai with a smile as she slowly stood up, feeling like she completely recovered before she turned to Shikamaru and asked him without hesitation, "What's the plan? Why do I have to come up with one?" muttered Shikamaru in annoyance, but Kurenai simply patted him before she said with a grin, "Because you are a Nara." "Guess I don't have a choice then," muttered Shikamaru lazily, but his eyes in contrast were scanning the battlefield non-stop, and he noticed that Naruto had a weird look on his face as he kept staring at the giant monkey in the distance, so he yelled, "Oi Naruto, can you use that jutsu?" A hesitant look appeared on Naruto's face for a second while Sasuke shot him a confused look since he didn't know what Shikamaru meant, but the former eventually nodded and said, "I need you to buy me 10 seconds, that's all." Hearing this, Shikamaru calmly nodded and turned to everyone else, "Teacher Kurenai, please assist Renmara with your genjutsu to hide Naruto from the beasts. The rest of us will do our best to buy enough time. This is good by you too." The last two he was referring to were clearly Sogetsu and Kazuki, and they simply shot Renmara confused looks before they nodded at Shikamaru. The plan was set and Naruto understood clearly. Everyone is putting their fate in me. I can't fail them, this time I will definitely succeed, thought Naruto before he crossed his fingers and created 2 shadow clones. After he was defeated by Ashiki, Bakurio got transported to a weird base that was located in an isolated dimension similar to Obito's Kamui or the ones Kagaya can create with her powers. There, Ashiki went through some weird halls until they arrived at a prison-looking structure that was filled with countless seals, and the moment they approached it, Bakurio was able to hear the sound of howling beasts from inside it. However, not long after he suddenly frowned as he could hear a human roar mixed among them and he felt his heart shiver slightly, so he turned to Ashiki and asked coldly, "Is this where you keep the beasts you captured?" Jigen tilted his head slightly before he responded, "You mean test subjects?" "Yes, this is where we keep them, and you are going to join them as well." "What about Mukai?" asked Bakurio with a hint of killing intent flickering in his eyes, but Ashiki wasn't fazed and calmly replied, "Unfortunately, he was a failure. Hopefully, you won't turn out the same." Before Bakurio could respond, a man wearing a scientist coat slowly approached them and eyed Bakurio silently before he said, "Would you like me to perform the same tests on him, Jigen-sama?" Hearing this, Ashiki calmly nodded and said, "Yes, Amato, be careful, this one is even more dangerous than the last one." "Yes, sir," replied Amato stoically before a cloaked person beside him pushed the restrained Bakurio into the weird prison, and he could instantly tell that the latter's strength was no joke. All the while, his eyes never left the doctor-looking person. His hair was white and he had a trimmed mustache and was wearing glasses, and he was sure that he never heard of such a person before. How's he related to Jigen? This guy feels strange, wondered Bakurio as he was dragged through a strange hallway. It had many rooms on both of its sides and each one of them was filled with deformed monsters. One of them was even a dragon-looking beast that was emitting a horrible aura, and there were even some devils and demons in the mix as well. It seems like they are doing similar research to mine, wondered Bakurio as he followed after the scientist silently through the howling-filled hallway. However, the giant cloaked man pushing him suddenly froze in shock as he felt Bakurio's body transform into something akin to a mountain as he stood still in place, and it brought a frown to Amato's face. He can actually resist Baro's strength despite all of his injuries. This person is definitely a monster in the outside world, maybe he can. I will have to test him first. However, Bakurio didn't care about all of this as he approached a small cell with a single human inside chained to its walls. His body was full of scars and it had weird scales emerging on some parts of his body. His long white hair was covering his face, but how could he not recognize his old friend, especially when he saw that singular activated Byakugan on his left eye that had a crazed look on it. You know him. This test subject was pretty good, but the experiment eventually failed and he lost his sanity. What a pity, we were almost able to integrate the dragon's bloodline into him and turn him into a suitable vessel, spoke Amato calmly while observing any changes in Bakurio's expression. Bakurio's eyes started shining with a blood-red light as the aura of a predator started gushing from his body, and it silenced all of the beasts in this prison while the giant Boro instantly caught him in his arms so that he doesn't do anything. However, Bakurio didn't care as his sight didn't leave the chained Mukai, and they soon locked eyes only to see the pure insanity in them before Mukai leapt from the wall and tried to attack them with a crazed look on his face, although his chains held him back. Let's keep going, spoke Amato after seeing this, and Bakurio didn't resist as he lowered his head to hide his expression while Mukai kept trying to attack them wildly. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, back at the south of the Land of Fire, Naruto had just summoned 2 shadow clones and was preparing an ultimate attack under the protection of everyone else. And as this was happening, Kazuki shot Sogetsu a weird look and asked, "Brother, are they telling us the truth?" Right after he said this, a giant hand came crushing at him and it was covered in a dense layer of rocks making it resemble a small hill. Clearly, he would be squashed like an ant if he doesn't do something quickly, so Kazuki instantly sent a giant lava release punch to meet it and buy him some time as he tried to retreat, but the giant gorilla directly swung its other arm at him and opened its mouth to attack Sogetsu with a terrifying wind release that could even cut through the armor of a Susanoo. However, Sogetsu wasn't fazed as he muttered, "Water release, giant water mirror jutsu." And right after he finished saying this, he waved his hand causing a giant circular mirror to appear in front of him and absorb the attack. Then, as if by some sort of magic, he rotated the mirror and the attack came out of it again, and it went right at the other hand of the beast that was attacking Kazuki, forcing it to retract. Then, he calmly spoke, "For Suya the peaceful demon to lose his calm, I don't think they are lying. That brat that just came is definitely similar to us. He's a descendant of a demon. Kazuki's frowned slightly when heard this before he turned his attention to the giant beast that was holding his hand in pain. However, it wasn't heavily injured thanks to the rock armor it was covering most of its body with, which made them feel slightly helpless. However, a voice suddenly echoed from the distance, "Oi, you two, try to restrain its movement to the best of your abilities." Shikamaru, huh? I wonder what's Naruto planning, muttered Sogutsu before he nodded at his brother, and they stood side to side for the first time since the start of this battle. They weren't going to run away anymore. Lave release. Hungry Earth. Spoke Kazuki before he put both of his hands on the ground and started pushing all the chakra he could muster into it. The giant monkey smirked at him mockingly after seeing that only small cracks with lava flowing through them appeared under it. However, the earth suddenly parted in a huge circle around it and the beast found itself falling into a pit of lava that was threatening to swallow it whole if not for its quick reaction and grabbing the edge of the hole with its giant hand. However, before it could drag itself out, Sogutsu calmly muttered, "Ice release. Ice age." Then, he directly plunged both of his hands into the hot lava, causing it to start solidifying at a fast rate, and before that gorilla that was almost 100 meters tall could bring itself out of the lava sea Kazuki created. It found the resistance increasing by the second. Until it got stuck completely by the time it got its head out of the hole, but by this point, both Kazuki and Sogutsu fell on their assess completely drained. "It's up to you now," spoke Kazuki through his gritted teeth, and he wasn't disappointed as right after, a strong wind suddenly hit them and caused the army of monkeys to freeze. Then, Kurenai and Ranmaru's genjutsu both dissipated to show a small Naruto with his right hand raised in the air, and above it was a giant rotating shuriken-looking jutsu made of wind. Ellipsis. This is, Sasuke stared in shock at the weird Rasengan his friend created, and he suddenly felt the distance between him and Naruto had widened significantly without him even noticing. But Naruto didn't notice this and he simply yelled, "I will definitely finish it off with this one attack." Before he started rushing at the beast while yelling, "Rasenshuriken." Sogutsu, Kazuki, and Sasuke along with everyone else alongside them watched in shock as Naruto rushed at the stuck beast and launched the scary-looking Rasenshuriken right at its giant head, and it had no chance to dodge it thanks to the two brothers' efforts. The resulting explosion once the Rasenshuriken made contact with the beast's head was so terrifying and could even be compared to the might of a tailed beast bomb. And without any doubt, it easily tore through the hard rock layer on the gorilla's body and started to tear its head apart, and it felt as if countless needles were stabbing it. Naruto actually grew this strong, was the thought on Sogutsu, Kazuki, and Sasuke's heads as they stared at Naruto with bewildered looks on their faces. They always thought that he couldn't surpass them as he always appeared childish. But now things appear to be different. That piece of wood they looked down on showed them that it could blind them if they are careless. And Naruto noticed this, so he gave them one final smirk before he fell to the ground face first. He was completely drained. What a terrifying jutsu. So this is what he has been bugging Bakurio-san for. However, it seems like he can't handle the giant chakra consumption, muttered Shikamaru to himself, but the others were able to hear it perfectly and they directly shot Naruto amazed looks. A few seconds later, the Rasenshuriken's effect finally ceased after it destroyed every single cell on the beast's face, turning it into mush. This was a jutsu worthy of being classified as forbidden. The rest of the army of gorillas watched this in terror before they turned tail and started running away shamelessly. "It seems like you kids have already surpassed us. I wish we had a teacher like yours," spoke Kurenai with clear envy in her eyes, wishing she had the same training as them when she was their age. However, life wasn't fair. Just like how Naruto only has enough chakra to barely sustain one Rasenshuriken right now, he was no longer the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails after all, but he was free. "What should we do now?" spoke Kazuki carelessly. However, Ranmaru's face was suddenly covered in panic as he yelled, "Careful! That beast is still alive." However, it was too late, and before anyone could react, the bloodied beast opened its mouth and launched a terrifying roar infused with its wind release at them. It created a horrible shockwave that threatened to erase everything in their direction from existence. "This is bad, the kids are exhausted, and I can't defend against such a strong attack. What should I do?" Kurenai felt helpless, while the kids watched this with horrified looks on their faces. However, someone suddenly mustered all of her courage and stood in front of the group. "Hinata!" yelled Kurenai in shock, but she could only watch Hinata, who had a determined look on her face. Muttering, 8 trigrams, palms revolving heaven. Before she started rotating while unleashing all of her power, creating a giant sphere of chakra that covered everyone inside it and worked to deviate the terrifying shockwave away from their location. "I can fight as well," muttered Hinata with a tired look on her face and her whole body covered in cuts from the wind that managed to pass through her defense. And seeing this, Sasuke's face darkened even further as he thought, "Even Hinata is trying to surpass me. No, I can't allow this to happen." So, as everyone rushed to check on Hinata, Sasuke instead rushed at the beast with his hand covered in lightning and plunged it directly into its brain before he unleashed another burst of lightning from it to make sure that it was completely fried. Then, he simply stared at his hand with a disappointed look on his face. At this moment, only Sogetsu and Rinmara noticed his fluctuating emotions, but one of them didn't care while the other wasn't close to Sasuke yet, so he didn't know how to make him feel better. So, he was left to drown in his own thoughts until he decided, "Teacher is the only one that can help me surpass my current limits." Ellipsis. Meanwhile, back inside the special dimension, Bakurio got to know from the Dr. Amato that the name of their organization was Kara. It was founded by Jigen, but he wasn't told its true purpose. However, this doctor was currently staring at his body with an intrigued look on his face. "Your body is fascinating. You have incredible senses, better than any beast, and your reaction speed is superhuman. You even managed to train it to its full potential and even went above it. Amazing." Amato had a fascinated look on his face as he read the test results he acquired from Bakurio's body, but he then suddenly frowned and asked, "But how could you have so many bloodlines and they can coexist peacefully? This isn't normal. This man is no joke. It seems like he's no less of a genius as a researcher compared to that creepy snake," thought Bakurio, silently causing a certain snake to shiver slightly. "We have a device that can scan your life force. It appears that your life force has something to do with the way your bloodline work. If we can crack this, we might be able to integrate every bloodline in your body and you can become a terrifying monster." Amato spoke with a researcher's crazed look. However, this suddenly brought a weird light to Bakurio's eyes. "I have always been trying to get rid of the system's interference and allow my bloodlines to merge. But what if I don't remove that barrier and make use of it instead? What if this is a way to understand how to integrate bloodlines?" Just as Bakurio thought of this, a notification appeared in front of him that made him and all of his clones burst out in laughter at the same time, in unison, creeping out anyone that was near them, be it humans or beasts. Amato immediately retreated, feeling creeped out by Bakurio's sudden outburst, but how could he not react this way? The system had just surprised him. Congratulations, host, on gaining the function, Bloodline Collector. Bloodline Collector allows the user to integrate any bloodline he wishes, as long as certain conditions are met. The percent of the bloodline acquired depends on the purity of the sample used. Have you gone crazy? We haven't even started the experiments yet, spoke Amato coldly, but Bakurio completely ignored him. It seems like the system still has many functions that could be triggered, similar to the map and appraisal function. Let's see what are the requirements to integrate Hashirama's bloodline. With the thought in mind, Bakurio directly triggered this new system function and a new panel appeared in front of him. Bloodline Collector activated. Please choose a bloodline from the samples you have in your inventory. Sample chosen. Senju, purity 95%. Integration requirements. Level 100 Earth, Water, and Yang Chakra transformations, Nature Chakra absorption skill, respected or higher reputation with the Senju clan. Reputation. Bakurio was bewildered since he has never seen such a thing, but he received a new notification right after. Congratulations, host. Your appraisal ability has evolved into advanced appraisal and you can now see your reputation and the affiliation of people. Bakurio was truly shocked as he kept receiving one surprise after the other, and he even started to like this Dr. Amato for it. Is he my lucky star or what? Amato was weirded out by the look Bakurio was sending him, and he couldn't help but think, it seems like this experiment is definitely going to fail. However, Bakurio didn't care as he simply clicked on the news reputation function that appeared in his system's panel, and his head got slightly heated by the amount of detail it contained. I'm quite notorious, huh? Was the only thought in his mind. Bakurio's main body, which was covered by darkness, suddenly opened his eyes and spoke calmly in his mind. System. Right after, all the various system functions appeared in front of him, but he was most interested in the two new functions, Bloodline Collector and Reputation. I already have a vague idea on how the Bloodline function works, let's see the Reputation. As this thought flashed through his mind, he mentally willed the system to enter this new function. Reputation. This is a way for the system to digitize the way the host is viewed by the various factions of this world, and according to it, he can unlock certain hidden features when in those territories. The reputation ranks are as fellow, mortal, enemy, enemy, hostile, neutral, friendly, respected, honored, worshipped. How do I check my reputation? Asked Bakurio in his head, and right away, a notification appeared in front of him. Please use the map function to check the reputation. This is quite handy, thought Bakurio before activating the map function and made it show the whole world. There he noticed that there was a new window above each land, and it showed him his reputation with every single faction on that land. Curiously, he tapped on the Land of Fire and a panel appeared in front of him. Land of Fire. Overall reputation, honorable. Major factions. Konoha. Honorable. Daimyo. Respected. Uchiha clan. Honorable. Hyuga clan. Honorable. Senju clan. Honorable. Sarutobi clan. Respected. It seems like I'm highly regarded here, let's see what kind of benefits I'm getting from it. Bakurio curiously tapped on A+ button, causing a new window to open and show him his benefits. Plus 30% training speed in all arts when in Konoha. 50% discount on all purchases. Can buy any land in this territory. Has political standing in this territory and your words greatly matters. The increase to my training speed isn't that bad. Thankfully my base is situated here, and the other benefits are also quite good, thought Bakurio with an intrigued look in his eyes before he focused on his reputation with the Senju clan. Well, I guess it's only right considering that Tsunade is the main representative of this clan, but honorable that girl knows how to hide her emotions. Bakurio couldn't help but shake his head as Tsunade's image flashed through his face and directly started yelling at him for his crazy training, but then he refocused on these new functions. Finally, I can grow stronger, he thought before calmly dispelling the dark cocoon that was surrounding him and activated the Bloodline Collector function. He was going to integrate Hashirama's bloodline since he has all the requirements fulfilled. Initiating bloodline integration. Bakurio suddenly felt his blood becoming hotter and thicker to the point that it felt like hot magma was coursing through his veins. However, he didn't even flinch thanks to his pain resistance that allowed him to deal even with tears to his soul. Current progress 1%. 5%. As this was happening, Bakurio closed his eyes and started sensing his life force, and made sure to memorize everything that was happening, which caused his miracle doctor mastery to slowly increase. This is nothing short of a miracle, he thought with his heart beating loudly. He watched as his life force started to slowly absorb this new bloodline before it integrated it into the same pathways as the other bloodlines. However, the changes didn't end there, as he could feel every single cell of his body was filled with vitality and his chakra channels enlarged by more than 10 times, and they were still getting bigger and bigger. Such was the effect of Hashirama's bloodline, and to his surprise, his skin color didn't change at all. It was still the same creamy white color, unlike the pale white color that Orochimaru or others that integrates this bloodline end up gaining. I feel alive, muttered Bakurio silently as he received multiple notifications. Congratulations host on gaining the Senju bloodline. Purity 95%. Your chakra capacity has increased by 30 times. You gained the ability Enhanced Regeneration. Your affinity toward water, earth, and yang releases has increased by 95%. You Master Chakra talent has advanced to Grandmaster level. You gained Advanced Genjutsu resistance. What an amazing gift. No wonder Hashirama was a monster. This bloodline is no joke, and it seems like a perfect counter for the Uchiha, muttered Bakurio silently as he clenched and unclenched his fists. With this vitality, I can push my body beyond its limits without worrying about it crumbling. However, just as countless plans were flashing through his head, his eyes suddenly started aching terribly as two faint energies that were slumbering in his body suddenly reacted and started clashing against each other. They were Indra's and Ashura's chakra, and one of them was using the Senju bloodline to fight while the other used his Uchiha bloodline. But before long, Asura's chakra defeated Indra and kept him at bay. What the hell just happened? Don't tell me, was I about to awaken the Rinnegan but Asura's chakra stopped it? Or was it just that the bloodlines aren't equal so the fusion failed? Bakurio contemplated silently on what just happened before he calmly shrugged and tapped on his bloodline collector function. Good thing I got Madara's blood when I beat the crap out of him during our training sessions. A weird smirk flashed through Bakurio's eyes before the room got enclosed into darkness once more as he started going through a magical transformation. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, as the main body was busy doing his own thing, one of his clones that was at the academy welcomed the return of Naruto and the others, but 3 people directly asked to talk to him privately. They were the demon brothers and Sasuke. It seems like Sasuke finally realized how determined Naruto is, thought Bakurio silently before he said to the trio, "Follow me." Once they entered his office, the trio spoke at the same time. "Teacher, I want to talk privately." Uchiha brat, you better scram before I beat you up, spoke Kazuki with a threatening look, and Sasuke wasn't in a good mood so his eyes instantly turned into his 3-tomo Sharingan and yelled back, "What did you say?" Seeing the 2 kids butting heads, Sogetsu gave Bakurio an apologetic look before he separated them, although they did it reluctantly, so Bakurio calmly said, "Stop arguing, Sasuke. I understand why you are here, wait for me at training ground number 7. "Yes, teacher," Sasuke replied respectfully before he shot Kazuki a cold look and left. "Tisk, cheeky brat, I need to teach him a lesson," spoke Kazuki with an angry look and Bakurio directly smacked him and said, "Why is the pot calling the kettle black? Ah, just wait you two, I will defeat you one day." Yay, anyways, why are the 2 of you here?" Bakurio asked directly, and Sogetsu hesitated slightly to Bakurio's surprise before he spoke. "Suya wants to talk to you directly regarding a certain matter, he says it's very important." What could be so serious for that demon to want to talk to me? Asked Bakurio with a slight smile, but Sogetsu's next words shocked him slightly. He said it's related to that kid Rinmara and someone called the Heart Demon. Right after Sogetsu said this, Bakurio put his hand on his head and entered the special seal where Suya was held captive. "We meet again, peaceful demon," spoke Bakurio calmly, and Suya replied with a similar calmness on his face, "I wonder who's the real demon here." "It's you. Anyways, is this what you want to talk about?" asked Bakurio coldly but Suya shook his head and said, "No, I want to talk to you about someone, the Heart Demon." "Go ahead, I'm all ears." The Heart Demon was a mysterious figure back in the demon realm. He was one of the first demons that developed his abilities thanks to the teachings of the great demon sage and gained the gift to sense, manipulate, and even create emotions. Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, "And what happened to this demon?" To this, Suya surprisingly shook his head and said, "I don't know, no one knows. He disappeared at around the same time the great demon sage disappeared, and no one heard of him since. However, I met him before, and I can clearly sense his presence in that little boy's bloodline." "Well, this is quite unexpected," muttered Bakurio as his eyes started flashing with many possibilities, and he didn't like the prospect of some of them. Inside Sogetsu's seal space, 2 cold-hearted beings were currently confronting each other with their true intentions hidden deeply in their hearts. However, that silence didn't last for long as Bakurio shrugged and said, "So, why did you tell us this information? I don't think you've got it in your demonic heart to help others." Hearing this, Suya didn't deny it and instead nodded. "Indeed, I wouldn't help you if this didn't benefit me as well, but it does." This truly attracted Bakurio's curiosity so he asked, "And how does this benefit you?" Suya unleashed his unique demonic aura and said eerily, "I can help you unveil the process of how the Heart Demon managed to pass on his bloodline. In exchange, I might find clues on his disappearance and maybe, just maybe, clues regarding Aster." "Aster, huh?" Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly as a certain priestess flashed through his eyes but he turned his attention to Suya and thought, "This demon is definitely plotting something, he can't be trusted." The moment Bakurio concluded this thought, he directly shut down Suya with a smirk on his face. "Unfortunately, I don't need your help in this matter, just be a good demon and stay here in your prison." Hearing this, Suya smiled eerily and said, "As I guessed, you probably know a very strong demon and he's giving information about us. It's fine, eventually, you will come to ask me for help on your own, but you might not be able to pay the price at that time." Bakurio couldn't help but tilt his head at the confident demon before he chuckled slightly. And said, "We will see if you stay this confident in the future." Then, he directly vanished, leaving the peaceful demon lost in his not-so-peaceful thoughts until he eventually muttered with a dark look on his face, "Who's it? Who's the demon helping this bastard in the dark?" Ellipsis. Meanwhile, after Bakurio left the seal space, he advised Sogetsu and Kazuki to not listen to these demons anymore and told them that he will study Ranmaru's situation on his own. Nodding in understanding, the two brothers left, while he went to training ground number 7 where a certain Sasuke was waiting for him with a dark look on his face. This brat." Bakurio silently hid his presence and started approaching Sasuke from the back and tried to smack him on the head, but at the last second, Sasuke ducked down and barely dodged his attack, showing how honed his instincts were. Not bad, it seems like you mastered the art of being aware at all times." Bakurio spoke with a slight smile on his face as the image of him first meeting Sasuke flashed through his eyes. "Teacher, why did you help Naruto behind my back?" asked Sasuke with a grieved look on his face, and Bakurio couldn't help but pinch his cheeks and said, "I didn't choose to, he asked to be trained secretly," although someone eventually figured it out when he kept noticing his bruised hands. "How could I pass on an opportunity to get you motivated, you arrogant brat," thought Bakurio with a smirk. "Was it Shikamaru?" asked Sasuke with a slight pout on his face, and Bakurio nodded at him with a distant look. "That guy might not be as strong as you or Naruto, but he's far smarter and perceptive, that's his strength. What the point of being that smart if you are weak?" Sasuke asked with a mocking look, which earned him a punch from Bakurio that buried him into the ground and made him see stars, and when he regained his focus, he heard Bakurio say, "Some situations call for brave warriors, others require wise generals. Each of you will play a different role in life and only the future can tell who's going to make the biggest impact." "But Sasuke tried to speak, but he fell silent after seeing Bakurio was starting to grow angry, so he said reluctantly, "Sorry. You should apologize to Shikamaru, not me. Anyways, you want to grow stronger, right?" Bakurio asked calmly while sitting down on a chair he created through earth manipulation. "Yes," Sasuke replied with determination. "Do you have any plans in mind?" Bakurio asked with narrowed eyes, and Sasuke stared directly at his blood-red Sharingan and said, "I want to have eyes similar to brother and father, you two have it right. The Mangekyo Sharingan." Bakurio contemplated silently while staring at Sasuke until he made him uncomfortable and asked, "What's wrong? Is it impossible?" Hearing this, Bakurio shook his head and said, "No, I can do it. However, let me ask you this. Who do you think will win in a fight if you only use the basic Sharingan, you or Itachi?" "Of course Itachi," replied Sasuke without hesitation, prompting Bakurio to ask next, "What about a fight between you and Fugaku?" "Father will win," Sasuke said hesitantly, and seeing this, Bakurio finally asked him the true question, "Why do you think that's the case?" Sasuke suddenly felt stumped by this question, so he started contemplating it deeply. "Why would I lose to brother and father? I have a strong jutsu like the Chidori, and I even learned Kenjutsu and Taijutsu from teacher." Many scenarios flashed through Sasuke's head until a single answer came to his mind. "The only reason I could think of for my loss is that I lack experience." "That's correct," Bakurio nodded before he raised one finger and said, "But that's only one reason for it." "What do you mean?" Sasuke asked curiously, really wishing to get an answer. "A ninja is strong only when they create their own style of fighting that covers all possible situations, dealing with small, huge, singular, or many targets, close or ranged. A skilled ninja has a fighting style that could deal with all of those situations, and this is the kind of ninja Itachi is, which is why he's feared wherever he goes. His Mangekyo Sharingan is just the icing on the cake." "Fighting style?" Sasuke asked in confusion, but a light of hope was flickering in his eyes. "Yes, fighting style. The best jutsu you have. The Chidori is only good at dealing with single targets, and it's close range, so it puts you in danger. You need to develop other techniques if you want to get stronger." Sasuke fell silent slightly before he asked, "What are the other reasons?" At this, Bakurio simply pointed at his heart and said, "You need a reason to fight for. Why do you desire strength? Who are you willing to risk your life for? These are what give you the determination to walk the path of a ninja." "I want to protect the people I love, so teacher, please teach me." replied Sasuke without hesitation and bowed slightly, bringing a smile to Bakuryo's face, and he rubbed his head gently. Of course I will. He, I will surpass those bastards and teach that brat Kazuki a lesson for messing with me. Sasuke got excited and clenched his hands. Meanwhile, Bakuryo simply smiled warmly, and though, how can I not help you when you look up this much to me? Worshipped, huh? That's quite a jump of reputation between characters, considering that idiot Suya views me as a mortal enemy yet still wants me to trust him. Tisk. So, Sasuke's training started, training to learn new variations for his Chidori and how to integrate them into his fighting style. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, inside Kara's headquarters, Amato slowly approached Jigen and reported, Jigen-sama, the test results for Bakuryo's body are out. Oh, what do you think? Jigen asked curiously, and Amato reported everything to him without hesitation. The quality of his body is very high, and he even has many bloodlines of descendants of the Otsutsuki, making him very suitable as a vessel. But there's an anomaly with his life force that I'm still not so sure about, but I believe it will affect the experiment favorably when you inject him with your Kama. However, his mental state doesn't seem stable. I see, I sensed that abnormality as well. That's why I captured him. Good, let's try it. His mental state won't matter since I plan to take over his body anyways. Thankfully we won't have to bother with enhancing that other guy's body anymore. That's right, I will take care of disposing of him. Amato responded, and Jigen casually nodded as he started making his way toward Bakuryo's location. In training ground number 7. Listen Sasuke, do you know why the Rasenshuriken is so strong? Bakuryo asked with a slight smile as small Rasenshuriken started to form on top of his right hand to the shock of the Uchiha brat. It uses a huge amount of chakra and concentrates it into the form of countless sharp wind needles that consequently forms a sphere that explodes upon contact and unleashes all those terrifying wind needles at the target. Sasuke replied after recalling what he analyzed with his Sharingan when Naruto used it against the beast, and now as he was seeing it on top of Bakuryo's hand. That's right. This jutsu is extremely complicated, and only someone with great imagination like Naruto can come up with it. In fact, he can even be considered a genius for it. Bakuryo spoke lightly, shocking Sasuke. Genius. Yes, genius. The Rasenshuriken uses the Rasengan's way of manipulating chakra as its base, then you have to use wind transformation on it to create this devastating attack. Yet, despite how simple it sounds, neither of the other users of the Rasengan was able to accomplish such a feat, and they included extremely talented people such as the 4th Hokage and Jiraiya the Sannin. Bakuryo explained to Sasuke, who kept getting more and more shocked, and he couldn't help but ask. Teacher, how did Naruto master it then if it's this difficult? Well, it's because what he lacks in intelligence, he makes up for it in imagination, replied Bakuryo calmly as he dispelled the small Rasenshuriken. But, what does this have to with anything? Hearing this, Bakuryo contemplated slightly before he extended both of his hands, and water slowly started gathering on both of them. On one hand, the water directly emerged in a huge quantity and started revolving around it in a continuous cycle. However, on the other hand, the water kept gathering one drop at a time, and even then, those water droplets still appeared to be moving each on their own without merging, yet they also formed a continuous cycle. Well, Sasuke, what do you think is harder? To imagine transforming your chakra into a flowing river directly, or to start from the base and create water droplets first and then control them to form something similar to a river? Sasuke stared in amazement. Teacher's chakra control is unmatched. Then, he coughed slightly and said, of course, imagining a river directly is much easier. Bakuryo nodded at this before he said with narrowed eyes, however, intelligent people tend to overthink things, and instead of enhancing their imagination to make their job easier, they tend to try focusing on controlling every aspect of their jutsu, and with something as complicated as the Rasengan, that's a recipe for failure, considering that the human mind can only focus on so many things. Sasuke hesitated slightly before he asked, but, this appears counterproductive. How is it possible that focusing harder can cause negative effects? Well, they say going too far is the same as not going far enough. Same applies here. Another example is the body. If you train hard, you will grow stronger, but if you overtrain, you will simply injure yourself and grow weaker instead. Bakuryo replied with a slight smile, and Sasuke's eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. I see. Imagination to simplify a complex process. Sasuke clenched his hands in determination before he nodded and said, I understand. That's good, Bakurio nodded before he said, then the first step in our training is for you to use Chidori without any hand signs, let's get at it. Yes teacher. Yelled Sasuke and resumed his training once more. Meanwhile, the two brothers were secretly eavesdropping on this conversation and they eventually nodded at each other with determined eyes and set off to train as well. Bakurio of course noticed this, but he simply smiled before he stared into the distance and thought, now then, it seems like it's time to deal with this Jigen fella. Ellipsis. In Kara's special dimension, Jigen was currently making his way through the different cells and only came to a stop when he arrived in front of Bakurio. Ho, it seems like your mind is far more stable than I thought. Jigen spoke calmly while staring at the calm Bakurio who simply shrugged and said, well, I can't do anything about this situation so losing a bit of sanity is only normal. Disc, weak mortal, it's unfortunate that I will have to take over your body, spoke Jigen with clear disgust on his face before he grabbed Bakurio's hand. Then, dark seals started spreading all over his body before they moved to the hand that held Bakurio's and he started injecting him with those dark seals. Bakurio's eyes widened in shock, he didn't want to believe what was happening to him, but his mastery simply didn't lie to him. These are primordial seals. A hidden light flashed through Bakurio's eyes, a light of delight. Meanwhile, Jigen's body shivered slightly before he said, it seems like your pain tolerance is quite something, and your body is also a great match, you will be a great vessel. Bakurio frowned slightly while staring at his hand that now had a star-shaped design on it and he heard Amato say, Jigen-sama, you need to rest now, I will keep an eye on him until the ritual is complete and you transfer your soul to him. Ah, I still have some use for my current body anyways, Jigen replied and he turned around to leave but suddenly, a wicked smile surfaced on Bakurio's face before he calmly muttered, Mukai, the prey is ready to be eaten. The moment those words were uttered, Jigen and Amato felt chills as a huge explosion echoed from somewhere nearby before the sound of footsteps slowly approached them. What did you do? Jigen asked coldly, but Bakurio still had the same smirk on his face as he blinked out of his restraints and stood in front of Jigen, and not long after, the silhouette of a man slowly made its way to his side through the long hall. Wherever this man passed, the beasts would grow silent, both of his eyes were white and he had a third eye on his forehead. But different than the other two, this one was black and had a yellow slit in it like some sort of reptile. His upper body was bare, showing his perfect body and it was covered in an armor made of dark scales, and with his long white hair fluttering behind him, he calmly made his way and stood beside Bakurio before he started stretching and said, Oi boss, took you long enough to come find me huh? Well, I wasn't worried, and I guess I was right to do so, but still, long time no see Mukai, Bakurio replied calmly with a faint smile on his face. Indeed, the man beside him was the supposedly insane Mukai Kohinata, however, he was clearly far from insane as he replied, do you know how hard it was to manipulate my body and trick these people from finding out about my true situation? Still, this was quite the fruitful trip, I can't wait to test my current strength. Jigen stared at the wild smile on Mukai's and Bakurio's faces as they stared at him and he couldn't help but turn to Amato and ask coldly, what's going on? Amato had a frown on his face as he replied, my only guess is that this man Mukai has great control over his body thanks to some sort of bloodline, but I don't know how he faked his insanity. That's quite easy you know. He just put himself under a genjutsu that will only be dispelled if he sees me. Bakurio spoke with a weird smile, and Jigen couldn't help but recall how weirdly Mukai acted when he saw Bakurio the first time. At that time, did they exchange some sort of signal? Tisk, they planned to weaken me first huh? Jigen frowned slightly before he said, well, it seems like I will just have to kill him and restrain you again. Then, he confidently started walking toward them, their rematch is about to start. Flashback. In one of the rooms inside Bakurio's secret base. Tell me what are you planning, otherwise I can't sit still and do nothing with someone like Ashiki lurking in the dark and slowly recovering his strength. We need to strike him now that he didn't find a suitable vessel yet, Kagaya asked Bakurio sternly after hearing about the capture of his true clone and the person behind it. Seeing that there was no way out of this without being honest, Bakurio shrugged slightly before he said, well, My plan is simple. You told me before that the reason the Otsutsuki are immortal is because they perfected a technique that allows their souls to reincarnate in a new vessel, and if that vessel is compatible enough, they would even regain their full power, right? Kagaya frowned slightly after hearing this before she replied, yes, we call it Kama. It modifies the genetic structure of a vessel until it transforms it into that of an Otsutsuki. However, you shouldn't be greedy. Removing it once branded on the body is almost impossible, and it's not easy to resist an Otsutsuki member in a soul battle. Not to mention, your body is weird. Oh, so she also noticed my abnormality, huh? Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly before he smirked and said, don't worry, I'm confident I can win a battle of souls, and I don't plan to use that power for myself anyways. You, don't tell me you really plan to steal Ishiki's power. Kagaya's eyes widened slightly in shock, but Bakurio only responded with a dark smile and said, it will all depend on a certain idiot. Flashback ends. Meanwhile, back at Kara's dimension, Mukai and Bakurio stood together and fearlessly stared at Jigen that was approaching them with a dark look on his face as seals quickly covered every part of his body. Oi Bakurio, let me deal with this guy. I want to test my current strength and he's going to be a good warm-up. Mukai spoke with a slight grin on his face and started doing some stretches, and curious about his current power, Bakurio nodded slightly and said, go ahead. Seeing this, Amato quickly retreated and summoned someone else, the giant Boro. Arrogant kids, do you really think you can beat me just because I'm slightly weakened? Jigen spoke coldly before he disappeared from their view. However, Mukai also disappeared at the same time and a huge clash happened in front of Bakurio before two figures came out of it unscathed. Disc, you actually fully integrated that dragon bloodline? Jigen asked coldly while staring at Mukai, and he could still feel his right hand shaking slightly after their clash. You are indeed strong. Mukai spoke with a weird smile that annoyed Jigen, so he calmly raised his hand and aimed at the two of them. Then out of nowhere, countless projectiles moving at terrifying speeds came flying at them. However, Bakurio still didn't move at all and simply watched as Mukai closed his third eye and activated his now two Byakugans, causing the veins on his face to enlarge as blood started rushing toward them. Then, Mukai calmly started deflecting Jigen's attacks with his gentle fist. Nobody could match his taijutsu mastery with one Byakugan, and now he had two. He can react to my Daikokudan projectiles, huh? Jigen frowned slightly before he suddenly manifested a giant spear and rushed at Mukai, starting a taijutsu battle. How foolish, Bakurio muttered calmly, and he also noticed Mukai had a faint smile on his face as he and Jigen started exchanging blows. Meanwhile, a vast air pressure suddenly came crashing down on him, and when he raised his head, he noticed that the newly arrived Boro disappeared at a terrifying speed and was aiming a kick right at his head. What do you think you are doing? Boro suddenly heard this whisper in his ear, and he suddenly noticed that Bakurio wasn't in front of him anymore. What? He disappeared. However, before he could react, Bakurio had already appeared above him and stomped him into the ground. Boro quickly tried to react by doing hand signs and pushing his hands into the ground. Lava release, planet branding blast. Bakurio felt a slight tremor on the ground before it suddenly exploded with yellow acid rushing out of it and aiming to melt him away. However, Boro suddenly felt a chill as Bakurio simply asked again with an eerie aura surrounding him. I said, what are you doing? Then suddenly, all of the acid parted in the air as if afraid to touch his body, leaving Boro shocked as he thought, did he control my own chakra? How is this possible? However, he couldn't contemplate that much as a giant Rasenshuriken slowly formed on Bakurio's hand while his leg manipulated gravity to incapacitate his body. Die. Bakurio spoke calmly before he dropped that giant Rasenshuriken right on Boro's head while he himself jumped away so that he doesn't get devoured in its impact. Meanwhile, Boro's upper body got shredded into pieces. Amazing, he dispatched Boro so easily. Though Amato, who was watching this from a safe distance, or so he thought, but suddenly an eerie voice suddenly echoed in his ears as well, like a devil's whisper, what do you think you are doing? Amato froze in fear, and he couldn't even muster the courage to stare at the person standing behind him, especially when he felt the ominous eerie eyes staring at him like some sort of insect, but he eventually clenched his hands until they bled, regaining a bit of control over his body, and said, please hear me out. Oh. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, outside the prison-like structure, Mukai's and Jigen's fight has escalated to unimaginable degrees. The latter was using more and more of his strength despite the damage it was causing to his body, while Mukai's body kept transforming more and more, making him resemble a dragon. Damn it, it seems like I can't avoid ruining my current vessel if I want to deal with this bastard. His defense is too good. Ashiki frowned slightly as he felt his chakra channels were about to break apart and the life force was quickly escaping him. Tisk, fine, it seems like I will have to go all out, he thought. However, this distraction caused a terrifying shockwave to smash into him and bury him deep underground, sent by none other than Mukai. What are you getting distracted for? Mukai spoke with a wide grin and waited for Jigen to get out. However, he suddenly felt a terrible pressure growing underground, and Bakurio felt it as well, so another true clone appeared beside him and said to Amato, "We will continue this conversation somewhere else." Then, he instantly disappeared and appeared beside Mukai, who was flying in the air with weird black wings that emerged on his back. "Be careful, we are about to face a monster," Bakurio spoke with a stern look on his face, but Mukai still just shrugged before he said, "Aren't we monsters as well?" Bakurio stared at Mukai's current appearance with slight intrigue before he responded with a smirk, "Can't argue with that." However, a huge pressure suddenly exploded from the ground as Ashiki slowly made his way out, and this time he was almost back to full power as even his appearance morphed into his true one. He had pale skin, and a long, curving horn that grew from his left brow and wrapped around the back of his skull before jutting outward from his right temple, resembling a crown. The iris and pupil of his right eye were yellow with a black wheel-like pattern with 8 spokes coming out of the center, while his left eye was a Byakugan. He bore matching tattoos on his chest and back. On his chest was a vertical column of 6 magatamas or tomo topped with an emblem resembling a black mallet across his chest, and on his back was a vertical column of 6 smaller black mallet emblems. His hair, right eyebrow, and goatee were pale blue, trimmed short with unusual alternating zigzag patterns resembling the hair parts worn by other members of his clan, while his fingernails and toenails were painted a deep black. "Now then, you can only blame yourselves for forcing me into this form." Ashiki suddenly disappeared, and before Mukai or Bakurio could react, his punch landed directly on Mukai's stomach and sent him flying down to the ground like a meteor. Then, he turned to Bakurio and directly sliced his neck off his body. Thank you for listening, guys. See you in the next part.